Going to Dr. Nick Begich with about as important an information as you can cover. And this information is about as important as it can get, dealing with mind control. So we're going to be talking to him in just a moment. Speaking of Dr. Nick Begich, even when he's on with us, I don't even plug the fact that we carry all of his books and videos at discounted prices at Infowars.com. Not only do you get important information, but your purchase of the books, the videos, the materials also supports the different researchers that are out there and Infowars.com. Angels Don't Play This Harp, Advances in Tesla Technology, Dr. Nick Begich, excellent book, updated. Controlling the Human Mind, the Technologies of Political Control or Tools for Peak Performance. It's a double-edged sword. The globalists want to use it to actually reduce performance because they're threatened by free humanity. That's available at Infowars.com. Harp, the update. Angels Still Don't Play This Harp. Great documentary, DVD. And Mind Control, A Brave New World or Enhancing Human Performance. That on DVD as well. So basically film versions, but updated of those two books, all very scholarly, very well footnoted and documented, in your face with Dr. Nick Begich. All of that available at Infowars.com. Also, a great new film by G. Edward Griffin, and that's What in the World Are They Spraying? This is available at Infowars.com right now. The new book that you can only get at Infowars.com, Big Brother, The Orwellian Nightmare Come True by Mark Dice. It starts shipping, in 12 days. So if you want to be the first to get Big Brother, The Orwellian Nightmare Come True, and support folks like Mark Dice and independent researchers, maybe you already know all about the Big Brother control grid. You probably will learn some stuff, but your friends and family and neighbors, it's a good chance will read something with a handsome cover like this that has a good boil down in the back, and then you can wake them up. Knowing this information is only the beginning. You've got to pass it on. You've got to have that burning desire to get the job done. Also, The Secret of Oz, Solutions for a Broken Economy, dealing with the banksters and what they've engineered in our society and solutions to counter it. All those poor union people up there protesting, they have no idea what's happening. This is austerity. This is where everything is cut to pay it to the bankers. The Republicans up there, they have no idea what's happening. We're going to explain that coming up in the third hour today, how they need to shift their paradigm and see the big picture. So that is coming up. But again, The Secrets of Oz available at Infowars.com, and then other great films that we carry and that we've also produced. Films, of course, like Invisible Empire, A New World Order Defined, Fall of the Republic, The Obama Deception, Endgame, Terror Storm, all available at Infowars.com or by calling toll-free 888-253-3139. You can also write to us at P.O. Box 19549, Austin, Texas, 78760. Or, excuse me, 78760. That is correct. Okay, let me just kind of reset here for a moment, because when I get into a subject this big and this important, I really want to be on, I really want to be focused, and I want people to understand this is not hyperbole, okay? Just like 15 years ago, I was sent secret documents from a nurse in San Antonio about all babies at birth having their blood taken and put in a secret global database for bioweapons development, drug development, you name it, race-specific bioweapon development. And I covered these secret documents on air, and then families began to sue in the last decade, and won suits in Minnesota, Texas, and other areas. Every time I did research, it was my listeners suing, because they'd go to the hospital, they'd watch them take the blood, they'd tell them no, they'd still do it, and they caught them. Now it's admitted, secret global database, upkept by the Pentagon in the U.S., race-specific bioweapon research, you name it. People couldn't believe me for 15 years, even though I had the documents. It's kind of like 1996. The Telecommunications Act said all cell phones will be tracked in real time. The government can dial in and listen to you without your phone even being on. This was under federal law for the regulations. Now it's mainstream news. People go, oh, yeah, everybody knows that. They don't want you knowing about this until it's already in place. Now, Dr. Nick Begich was on with us a few months ago, and he said, Alex, He said, you're focusing so much on sodium fluoride, which lowers IQ and causes degeneration of the bones and causes lowering IQ. Sure, that's important. You're focusing on mercury, lead, things like that. He said the real issue is, and what I see most of the globalist interest is psychotronic, electronic, wavelengths, light. And since I had him on, and I've done a lot of research on it as well, and we're going to go to the doctor here in a moment, I've seen all these mainstream news articles about U.S. Patent 6506148, nervous system manipulation by electromagnetic fields for monitors. We know there's the propaganda on TV. We know that there's the flicker rate that puts you in a dream state, highly suggestible. But this is more than that. And literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patents dealing with this, and DARPA in the mainstream news and the Baltimore Sun saying, oh, we're testing towers to calm you during emergencies. So there's this coming out of this. Ceiling lights in Minnesota send coded internet data. Flicker rate. Well, your eyes are just like an infrared collector. In fact, they pick up part of that spectrum. It can program the brain. The data down power lines, which they now admit will control your thermostat, your refrigerator. They're invading through everything. They're way ahead of us technologically. This is why they're so arrogant. And reading these patents, it says they can physiologically change you, including hurting you, potentially triggering heart attacks, you name it, through the television. So the point is, we're going to look at the systems that can be used to attack us with Dr. Nick Begich of earthpulse.com, the eldest son of the late United States Congressman from Alaska, Nick Begich Sr. If I go over Dr. Begich's whole bio, we'll be here for hours. His brother is a U.S. Senator, obviously Senator Begich, but he's really a leading expert. He's been an expert speaker before the EU Parliament. The list goes on and on. Let me just shift gears down to Dr. Begich. I did that long intro so folks could know where we're going with this. And I understand you don't want to scare people. You want to empower them with this info. But if people aren't even aware of it, I don't even see it as scaring. If I can tell somebody, hey, don't jump off that cliff, you might get hurt. That's not fear. I'm telling them what's happening. I want folks to become aware of this, and your deep research into the patents and things that we know are clearly being covertly rolled out and tested. Dr. Begich, thank you for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alex. It's always great to be with you. You know that patent that you just cited, and it came out of a recent press report. Actually, I quoted the exact same patent back in 2006 in the book Controlling the Human Mind, and it's our footnote number 86, and it's actually clustered around a whole series of patents that deal with the same situation. Let me just read some of the names of the patents, which make sense for folks and will actually draw out some of the information. One of them is a human auditory system, responses to modulated electromagnetic fields. We have another one that's listed that's an apparatus and method for remotely monitoring and altering brain waves. Another one, multi-channel brain signal amplifying and digitizing system, so that you could actually pick a signal out and transfer it through a computer system. But there's a series of them. There's dozens of them quoted in that book and footnoted there. And the reason we wrote this was this we consider to be the most significant issue facing the 21st century. I mean, when you think about whether it's light emitted from a television set, by modulating or pulsing that light in a very specific way, you can create all kinds of physiological coupling, not just with the nervous system, but then affecting the entire system, whether you're targeting the brain or just creating a situation of hyper-relaxation so that when the normal propaganda through advertising or news reports or what have you, it actually integrates at a much, much deeper level than most people realize. You think about your wife hollering at you when you're watching a television show and you're totally oblivious, or you talking to your kids and they absolutely do not register in their consciousness anything you're saying. They're actually in a very light, trance-like state, and they are literally not watching the program. They are the program. And that's the important direction in which technologies change. There's another article that we quote from the U.S. Army War College, and it's in their quarterly called Perimeters. The article was called "The Mind Has No Firewalls," and it was written back in the late 90s. But we quote that frequently because what it says is that any electromagnetic carrier, whether it's the radio or TV networks or even the electromagnetic grid that surrounds all of us, or cell phone towers or any of these things, can carry a signal, can modulate a sort of a secondary signal that the body will recognize or the mind will recognize depending on how that's tuned. And literally, think of the human body as a very, very finely engineered electromagnetic circuit that can be manipulated in the same way as other less sophisticated man-made electromagnetic circuits. And the difference is our level of knowledge and technology is allowing us to couple with the human body in a much, much different way and a much higher resolution where much more is possible. And that's why this is such a critical issue, not from the standpoint of fear, but if we don't have knowledge, when we start to see the effects of this, and I think we already are in many, many ways, it won't be understandable. It won't make sense. But in the context of technology, it all makes sense.
Well, look, 20 years ago, I'd go out to the countryside and wouldn't feel relieved. When I get away from cell phones and get out in the middle of nowhere, I feel like a human being again. And there's no doubt, in fact, I have the documents, they're testing all of this on us. And now under the cybersecurity, Homeland Security takeover of all telecommunications, they're putting their equipment in to push carrier waves over the top of it. And that's why they're so arrogant. The general public is in a mind control trance right now. We're trying to break you out. Okay, Dr. Nick Begich is our guest. Dr. Begich, they have the EAS emergency alert system over all radio and TV. The president's announced he's going to start making announcements on those, announcements on 9,000 telescreens at the Walmarts and other locations where you've got to look at the message when you're in the checkout line. You've got to look at the Jumbotron. And the studies show that now within seconds, you can become mesmerized by TV with these messages. The whole world is being turned basically into a Times Square system. The license plates are going to switch to digital. California's announcing with messages there, little TV screens. You can see this control grid they're putting in. And reading these patents, they can not just make you suggestible or submissive. They can make you angry. They can make you, they can modulate it, and they can go in and trigger brain waves. It looks like this says, and actually kill you deader than a hammer if they want to, Doctor.
Right. They can actually modify signals to target any system of the body, not just the brain. They can target any of the vital organs using modulated signals. They can attack specific cells, in particular trigger certain effects elementally within the body that can cause overloading, cause the body to malfunction and essentially shut down.
Cell phones, they admit, increase brain activity now.
Right. This is, again, any physiological effect, FDA is supposed to be controlling that, and here finally after, a decade or more, I think we published our first article on cell phones in Explore magazine back in 1998, and never changed our opinion, and quite frankly, time has proven, when you look at our work over the last 15 years, everything we suggested has come to pass in terms of how the technology evolved and how it would be used against us. This area in particular, in fact, the Military Air Force Research Lab refers to this whole area as controlled effects, the idea of being able to overload all of the sensory systems so that you can create complete sort of holographic experiences. That's the target of that article, and it was the front page story in Technology Horizons back in June of 2004. And it was by the Electromagnetic Directorate of the Air Force, and most folks don't even know there is such an organization.
And as you've noticed, because you say, look, chemicals are important, but Alex, most of the funding is the electromagnetic. Right. This, we don't know all the secrets. We know enough, but we know they're spending the big money on this.
Right. Well, actually, there's quite a bit. We had, I posted on our website a number of DARPA overheads that they used in some various presentations on creating interactions and coupling with the human nervous system, the very stuff of the article that you just quoted and the patent you quoted earlier. And this stuff put out by DARPA, I think, goes back to 2002, 2003 vintage.
Yeah, I remember them in the Baltimore Sun saying, we're testing towers in Baltimore. Right. It's no big deal to calm you in emergencies.
Right. Now, remember, it was just a few weeks ago, there was another article that was even, I think, more important in this sense, is it talked about our PSYOPs operatives in Afghanistan targeting U.S. congressional people that were out there touring the battlefield to get them to be more convinced.
Yes.
Larger troops were allocations were needed and so on. Well, they didn't describe exactly what they used, but this technology, literally getting it in their heads, is exactly what you would use. In fact, when we presented a version of this technology to the European Parliament back in 1998, they recognized who would be the first targets, our leadership, because if you can preempt or co-opt leadership in some way, the rest of the population generally just
that's the key here. Governments are obsessed with this because they know how important it is.
Right, and it's not just our government. I mean, the Chinese have spent just as much money when you consider purchasing power, maybe more than we have, because people forget this. Everyone laughs about the Chinese don't spend any money on this stuff. 60 billion a year, 70 billion a year in military. What's that? Well, go see what you buy for that kind of money. In China for $2 an hour and a bowl of rice.
Well, they don't have as much fraud either because they have a ruling class that already runs it all.
Well, that's true, and the solution for them is about 15 cents, I think, in the equivalent. And it's a bullet behind the back of the head. But the point of the matter is, these technologies are not that complicated, so much so that other sophisticated societies can't create them. In fact, when you look at centralized societies like China, which takes its brightest and smartest and allocates them into these kinds of projects, that's where the danger lies.
Well, it's the danger of the military-industrial complex and its undue dangerous influence. And Eisenhower went on to say, run by a technocratic elite, a technological technocratic elite. Stay there. Dr. Nick Begich, long segment coming up. Let's keep rolling with this and how we counter it. Dr. Nick Begich is our guest. I hope you're listening to us very carefully because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of patents dealing with electromagnetic mind control. I have personally only had time to read hundreds. Years ago, 12, 14 years ago, I'd have Dr. Nick Begich on about it. He's written books on the subject, available at Infowars.com. He has made films on the subject, Mind Control, A Brave New World, or Enhancing Human Performance. The issue here is, it's just like geoengineering. We know what's going on, they deny it, and then now they suddenly declassify a bunch of it. They admit it's going on, they don't declassify the entire program. And they tell people in USA Today, yes, we're mixing stuff with the jet fuel and spraying, but that part's secret, and it's to keep you safe from the end of the earth because of global warming. I mean, what are they doing for 39 years in a global secret program taking blood from all babies at birth in every nation controlled by the globalist? I mean, what is going on? There's this fake world we live in, and then there's the technocratic world that they've really designed. We're in this controlled reservation. And yes, these technologies could empower us. I'm not an anti-technology troglodyte here. I think it's great they got systems now that are very expensive. And that's why the globalists want to have socialized health care so you can't get it. They're now saying, oh, the case for killing Granny, we can hire 20 teachers if we kill Granny. They socialize things so they can then sell you on destroying others to get something so they can play us off against each other. Not some type of utopian socialism. But the issue I'm getting here is with miniaturization, with technology, with all of this, this is all going to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper for all of us. The globalists want to put in a global dictatorship before that happens, clamp down on the technology the general public can get, sequester it in technological reservations, corporations, universities, and government, and only allow a select few to have it. And in all their internal writings, the stuff that's even public but not widely distributed, they talk about, we can't let the public know what we've got. Do we just entertain them and try to sterilize as many as we can, or we just go ahead and do the right thing and wipe these people out? That's what Bill Joy talks about in Wired Magazine, owner of Sun Microsystems. That's what Ted Turner, Prince Philip, that's why they're so arrogant. And I've talked to elitists off record, and they say, Alex, People go, well, tell us who they are. If I told you on record, they never talk to me again. But they're on record, many of them writing, saying, look, the people, this is all admitted and they don't care. They deserve to die. Well, I don't deserve to die. And the globalists say, well, then you should join us. Well, number one, you're a bunch of backstabbing scum. I will not join in what you're doing. But the issue is, Dr. Begich, here's my way of putting it. If you take wild pigs or wild deer or wild horses or wild bovine, wild cows, wild whatever the case is, or domesticated, and you put a poison in the water that they can even taste, but it's the only water, they're going to go and they're going to drink it, and even as the cows and pigs die, they're still so stupid, they go and they drink it. Homo sapiens sapien is the only creature on this planet that we know of that, well, actually some insects would not drink it. It's funny, some of the lower animals, but then honeybees do. They're more like humans. They'll still eat the BT corn and die, but other animals won't. But it's like they've poisoned the well. They're turning up the ambient background noise of this system. They're rolling all of this out against us. I see it triggering. I see it happening. I see the bone cancer exploding from the fluoride, the brain cancer admitted from the cell phones in that exact area where you hold the phone, the brain waves changing, the IQs dropping, the globalists giggling and snickering as they do this. I mean, they're soft killing us now, getting us into a catatonic mind control state, so when they really roll out the mass plagues and start killing the majority of us, the public will watch their glowing telescreens. At that point, they'll flip on the high-powered stuff to just sit there in your house and wait for help as they fly over with airplanes pumping the bioweapon out. I mean, I could see their plan as clear as I saw them blowing those towers up 2 months before that happened. I see this plan coming in the next decade or so if we don't get the word out, Dr. Begich. I know I'm ranting. I want to hold you a little bit in the next hour if you can, because I'm ranting. You've got all the knowledge on this. But every bone in my body, every cell in my gut, everything in the pit of my stomach, my soul tells me, and I have the evidence. As you said, most of this is public, that they've already rolled this out against us. Tell us what they've got. What are your ideas to counter it? Do we try to get companies up to start scanning the TVs and things for these fields, studying carrier waves? Do companies come out with filters you put on your TV? How do we stop the fluorescent light bulbs that they're trying to force us to take, which they admit they're going to use to flicker control us? You notice in government buildings is where they're starting with their own minions.
Right. You know, this is all, as you say, it is being rolled out. It's being used. There's very little technology that we're protected from. The idea of building filters or creating systems that would not allow this is something that actually did come up. It came up by some of the originators of the technology back in the 80s to screen out signals from our adversaries, but in so doing, we screen out our own, because these are, it doesn't matter who's sending the signal structure has to be the same in order to create the same biological or physiological or mental effects.
So how do they stop blowback?
Well, that is the problem, and I don't think they can. I think this technology is out of the can and advancing fast enough and furiously enough where there's enough independent work that ultimately it's a question of how much are they going to tell us and how much danger are our own systems in. Because I can tell you that every system that we have that could be effectively used as a carrier can be used by both commercial interests, governmental interests. It's not so much worrying about just some big brother with the command and control of huge technology. It's gotten flatter, meaning more and more access to these kinds of systems. The flip side is this, is in all of the research that I've done on this subject, the one thing the military and other researchers discovered is a bit about the human potential, or what they now call anomalous human capabilities, these things that never they could explain, mental telepathy. How does that work? Well, now they're actually developing systems to synthesize it, because they have figured out how that works. Thinking about some of the bizarre things that were relegated to the paranormal or to the religious experiences of people, there are physiological explanations.
Meanwhile, the globalists tell the public none of this exists because they want you to be psychically or spiritually blind. Right. Meanwhile, they've quantified it in tens of thousands of studies. Everybody's got it. Some people got a lot of it. They've tried to develop psychic boosters, all of that.
Right, but we all have all of this latent capacity. It's our creative birthright. We're created, I believe, in the image of a creator, and science is proving more and more that human beings are much more than we have ever thought about in terms of being just some...
But the globalists know that. That's why everything they do is trying to suppress human potential.
That's right. And the easiest and the most effective actually is through fear and worry. Because if you look at an EEG, the mapping of the brain, actively engaged in fear or worry or these kinds of emotions, you get incoherent brain patterns, the kind that don't line up with this higher-ordered experiential thinking and more intellectual thinking. When you get whole brain coherence, where both hemispheres of the brain work together, they say that you can hit an ultimate unlimited IQ if you can achieve that. And there are technologies that are advancing that allow us to achieve that. And when you start to think about what our potentials are and heading in that direction, scares the hell out of elitists from the standpoint that what do you do with billions of self-actualized, fully engaged humans on a planet like this? You unmask the deceit, you unmask the fear, and you liberate the human consciousness is what happens. The exact opposite of what established orders in the world today would like to see happen. And that is what needs to happen. And I believe that is the coming evolution of humankind. We are going to experience that in the 21st century. Either it's going to be stripped from us by an elitist, controlled, and directed society, or we're going to liberate ourselves and recognize what we are, and our science is going to support that and allow us to advance to that level that I think we are all destined to move towards. I really believe that, and I think this generation, we can shake off the fear, but, man, it's going to be a rocky road over the next few years, and we have to be vigilant, we have to stay calm, and we have to stay directed. Well,
that's my point here, is that I don't come at this from a position of fear.
Right.
I come at it from a position of extreme action and resistance.
Right.
But when I'm at home or researching, I'm very calm. My mind is focused. I have complete maps with the integrated information I have of basically enemy operations. But then verbally, it's so hard to articulate the full connections, the clarity.
Right.
You can see the sophisticated enemy operations. I mean, years after I've already envisioned something, I can read declassified globalist handbooks, you name it. It's word for word what I've already envisioned, because humans are so similar. They're just working from a position of using it for bad. I've been able to see how they're using it and you know, hopefully trying to change it. But I found, though, the reason my show's successful is that for people who are in a mind-controlled state, people who are totally locked in, for whatever reason, you talk to most people, of anybody out there, they'll say, who woke you up? It's Alex Jones. And I think it's because I am intellectual, I'm intelligent, probably not as intelligent as somebody like yourself, but I'm also have that primitive drive, and at an instinctive level, the biggest mind controller out there is the truth. People go with that. They can feel the instinctive tribal truth of what I'm saying, and so I'm able to do the initial phase of getting people broken out of their trance, so that, not through fear, but by saying, hey, your house is on fire. That's not fear. No. We need to do something about that. How do you quantify what I'm trying to say there?
Well, you know, I think that's exactly right on target, because it's the, you know, if you think about all the things that have ever altered our course in life, I mean, you can think about, everyone who has a little gray hair can identify with this, is it's usually during the traumas, during the shocks, during the wake-up calls, that it's very rarely through those high emotional states when everything's running well. The same is true here. I think that all of us, by delivering information, it does shock the consciousness, and it should, because it should awaken people to the possibilities of what's out there, but then quickly moving from there to saying, all right, now that we know something, we're not powerless anymore.
And it's taken that first step and having that resolve. Right. When you start having little successes, little Trentons, then you can win the bigger wars.
Right, that's exactly it. You know, and I'll tell you where it's really important, because and you've led an activist life, and I have too, and we watched a lot of our friends and colleagues fall by the wayside when they succumb and let fear overtake them. And it is one step at a time. You know, we each have a sphere of influence out there, all of us do, and if we execute against that, whether it's talking to our friends, our families, whether it's this issue or another issue, engage the world around us in a positive way about what we're passionate about, and that passion will carry us forward in a much more positive way. And when it gets too overwhelming, back off. Maybe it's the burden for your partner to carry. You know, not everyone has to carry it all, and there's a lot of us out there. There's what I believe the most powerful source of solution here is what I call the organic internet. That's you and me, ladies and gentlemen. And we already are connected. We're connected by the human spirit, something no one else can interfere with in the profound ways they can with all of our other man-made systems. The fact is, we are in a unique club on the planet. We don't have to wait for leadership to arise. It already has. It's in each one of our created souls. We just have to begin.
But the globalists sell the lie of an Arnold Schwarzenegger, a man on a white horse, fixing everything so that people feel inadequate and small. Madison Avenue's first tool, they admit, is to make you feel inadequate so they can sell you their crutches. The truth is you're not inadequate. You're not an underachiever. You have incredible power, but realize it's Rome wasn't built in a day. The journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Start little. So many activists overthink it. In my 16-year battle, we've had devastating effects on the globalist by empowering people. It's our listeners are the real power of this show. It's the same thing with your 20 years of fighting, Dr. Begich. I mean, it's had just unbelievable effects.
Well, and you know, a lot of them you don't even plan for, and that's the beauty of it all. Some of the things that people have equated as small have actually been the most important things that have happened to us. I mean, we had a guy in a mailroom once that reached out to a publisher in Germany, that reached out and touched somebody in the right political place, and that chain of events started with just someone doing something, allowed us to get this issue in front of eventually the European Parliament. I can trace it back to one event that somebody said was small, and it reminded me of the story of the widow's mite, and many will remember that. You know, this is the person that gave what they had towards the effort they were engaged in, and what happened, it was so much bigger than the wealth of so many others. And that's how we have to look at our individual actions. What we do does indeed matter, and there are no small things. And you know, in all of this, the idea of controlling the mind, that's where it starts, by us choosing where we're headed and begin to map our strategy of getting there. And that's well, instead of being intimidated by knowing this is rolling out, be glad that Dr. Begich is there to warn you. Be glad we're here. Now warn others. Don't just stop there, but also realize, why do they want to put something this draconian in? Because they're scared of you. Because you've got a chance to beat them. Because you got power. That's exactly it. And it is that realization, all the work I've done in researching the mind effects, that conclusion that military and intelligence communities reach, that, wow, if people knew how to do this stuff, we'd really be in trouble, and they would be. Because a fully actualized population that understands what each of us is capable of changes the playing field dramatically. And that's where we're at. And that's this generation's choices will determine whether we live in a free and liberated society in terms of our basic human rights, or whether we're trampled on in an increasingly technocratic slavery. And that's what I see. And it's not a question of speculation. It's based on really firm research. In the books that we've written, over 1,600 sources were cited. And these aren't conversations in a closet. These are mainstream, first-rate sources that people can look at and evaluate. And the flip side of this is there are some really incredible technologies that are advancing that will change the way in which we look at the human body and human consciousness, the way we heal the body for many. Well,
that's why the globalists, as you are in a race to clamp all this down under this global dictatorship, so they don't have to give us all of this. We've almost reached the point where they're not going to be in control.
You know, and that's exactly it, because it doesn't take, and this is the other realization, it doesn't take that many. It doesn't take the 50% plus one to change the dynamic. Every major social, economic, political, scientific change that ever occurred on the planet started with one or two people just seeing it a little differently. And there are way, way more than that seeing it a little bit differently these days. And I think that's where the great hope lies. You know, what people are rebelling around the world in right now is not just, economics. It's about corruption. It's about liberty. It's about choosing and self-determination, even though it may not line up with exactly what we think is the right way.
They're rebelling against arrogance in government, the overall darkness of it. As the system tries to sell classical tyranny all over the planet as if it's good, they're trying to rebrand it and psychologically break our will. I see it backfiring. Dr. Begich, stay with us. Dr. Begich will be with us about 15 minutes into the next hour. Then I'm going to get into the whole left-right issue in Wisconsin. The beginning of austerity. We laid it all out. We know how it's going to unfold. The globalists are going to play the government workers and other union workers off against what's left of the free market population, having us fight with each other instead of looking at the big mega banks that have already sucked this country and countless other nations dry over and over again. See, Michael Moore says, oh, the big banks are corrupt. We need to get the money. It's a national resource, but they're going to get our money and transfer it to the bankers. Why do you think Hollywood finances him? Why do you think he's worth hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars? He's a cold-blooded operative who knows full well what he's doing. So does Glenn Beck. And I'm going to break all this down coming up. Okay, if you really want to know. And by the way, there's these conservatives out there when the liberals, they're not even liberals, are saying, you don't have a right to your own money, which means you're a slave. And the guy's like, well, you don't make anything of value. And they go, well, what do you do? And the guy's a defense contractor. He's on the government feed as well, which is what Eisenhower warned about. It's a tiny group running it all. This is not a free market. But Dr. Begich is with us for about 20 more minutes now. Dr. Begich, we've talked about some of the negative, some of the positive, but let's go through some more patents, some more systems of mind control, the carrier waves on cell phones, the coupling with the eyes and the television set, what's going on, how they can manipulate, other psychotronic ways they're controlling us.
Well, if you think about modulating a signal on television, let me just explain a couple of simple ways that works. Basically, the light emitted from a TV, if you go into a dark room and you look at the white wall behind you, don't look at the TV, look at where it's projecting, and you'll see the light flicker. You'll notice that. If you can maintain a specific pulse rate for just a few seconds, 10, 15 seconds, the brain will begin to follow that. It's called a frequency following response. And whether it's coming in through the optic nerve, through the eye by the flicker of the light, or you can do it through sound by engineering sound in a very specific way, you can create the same kind of effect. You can also do it with electromagnetic currents or electromagnetic fields that you're in close proximity to. But what happens is the brain locks onto that external signal and begins to mirror it. And so you can actually put someone in either a highly agitated state if you chose to, maybe right before the broadcast news where you're going to indict a certain political group or a certain faction of our community against one another, and all of a sudden you've got all this anger being directed at, maybe a situation that normally you wouldn't direct it at all. Or even more simply, putting you in a more passive, almost a trance-like state where you can then deliver information. Just deliver the news. Just deliver the commercial. Just deliver the soap opera, whatever it is that you're being programmed with, because the mind will absorb that and literally accept the programming. And that is what you're doing. It's almost humorous if you think about you're watching the program. You talk about programming routinely when you talk about television, but you never really think about the fact that you are being programmed. My wife and I are raising our grandchild, and I joke about it a little bit, because the messaging that you give a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old is essentially human programming. It's based on your emotions and your delivery and how you do it. But we do it as parents. We do it as grandparents. We do it all the time. But when it's done to us in a way that's engineered for a result, is that manipulation? Is that persuasion?
No, it's slavery. And there's one thing with ancient human instincts that's our base programming to pass on what's common sense and good for us. The globalists are giving us artificial programming covertly to hurt us, and it's absolutely criminal. We'll be right back in 1 minute. Okay, I've asked my questions. I've made my points. He's one of the type of guests that really gets me raving because it just so many thoughts going through my mind. But in this short segment and for the next, Dr. Begich, let's get into more of these technologies, more of these control systems. where you see this moving to, how it's unfolding. Why do we see the media starting to talk about it so much? Does that mean that there is a rollout of this about to happen as they try to normalize it? Dr. Begich, you've got the floor.
Assembly, free speech, freedom of religion, all these things that create the environment of free-thinking individuals that have a right to some level of self-determination. That's sort of the foundation under which this country formed, and a lot of the thinking that we started with formed. And I say thinking because in those days, whether you were the shopkeeper, the butcher, the baker, or the candlestick maker, you participated in your government. In fact, you were probably all of those things and had those skills just to function as a normal human being a few hundred years ago. Today, our skill sets are so different. The idea of being able to survive independently is not the creation of business school. You know, business schools create dependence and a requirement where you really don't have freedom, where you're literally pushed directions all through the day from the time you wake up until you sleep at night. That is so contrary to our basic nature, number one. At the same time, when you look at the amount of change that's on our horizon and what's coming, I mean, anyone who's lived 50 years has seen the revolution, in terms of technology, but you have seen nothing yet. Everything you've seen from the invention of the wheel to where we are today will be repeated every 9 months or so from here on out, and getting smaller and tighter and faster because of our computing power, our ability to process information. And this is where I was speaking earlier about resolution. Being able to see things more clearly, influence things more clearly, requires a higher and higher degree of resolution in terms of our circuitry and the fineness of that circuitry to discern these very minute and unusual signals that now we're not only able to discern, but we're able to manipulate, whether it's the activity within our brains that fit a very specific pattern when you're having very specific thoughts, and the idea of transferring those from one human being to another. Right now, DARPA has 2 contracts in the University of California operating today that are to determine how that mechanism works for creating artificial telepathy. But I can tell you, there was work done in 1985, and I've seen the unpublished work by one of the best in this field in the world. And in 85, they were able to take 9 test subjects in 2 separate rooms and transfer information from one mind to the other accurately. And they were using the cards that show squares and circles and rectangles and all these different shapes. And with 100% accuracy, with people that had no previous knowledge that they had this capacity, using an electronic apparatus, we're able to do it.
And that's why the globalists don't want us to have our own morals or our own compass. That's why they don't want parents, when kids are young, to put your own ideas in them. They say, oh, let your kid be themselves. That's so they can do all the programming. And teach them how to fail. Teach them how to commit suicide, which they admit the anti-suicide education has made it go off the charts. So they increase the funding because it's not failing. It's succeeding. They come to kill, steal, and destroy. Stay there, Dr. Begich. More straight ahead. If we go back to the 1950s, there were many cases of the CIA testing LSD and other drugs on unsuspecting members of the public, dropping it in their drinks, giving it to their own military personnel. All the examples of declassified times when they would nerve gas our own troops. I mean, it's about playing God. And shifting gears into an interesting area with Dr. Nick Begich talking about mind control. All of his great books and videos available at Infowars.com, Controlling the Human Mind, The Technologies of Political Control, or Tools for Peak Performance. Angels Don't Play This Harp, Getting into Harp, the Mind Control DVD, A Brave New World, or Enhancing Human Performance, the Harp DVD. They're all available, again, at Infowars.com, or you can go to his website as well, earthpulse.com. By the way, I've sent him a video Skype camera and stuff. You may be seeing Dr. Nick Begich. He's fixing he's changing offices right now, guest hosting some in the near future. So you'll be able to hear him unbridled without my interjections. But Charlie Sheen, the Charlie Sheen I've known, a lot of people that know him well have said, man, he's a quiet, nice, humble guy who's really giving. all of a sudden he seems really wild. I mean, could it be that he was sober for almost a decade, then went back on stuff for 7 months? Now he's kind of manic. When I got him on a few weeks ago, I wasn't expecting that, because when I was at his house a week before that, he wasn't manic. Now, you know, I told him, I said, they're going to fire you. And I said, you need to try to, you know, even though they've been attacking you and stuff, you need to try to get along with them. But more and more I look at some of these Hollywood stars, and you have to ask, I mean, it's a great example of not just government people, but folks that are due to be paid $200+ million. You know, does somebody want to cheat him out of that? Is somebody slipping a Mickey in his drink? Is there some type of psychotronic thing going on? Because I've been there when he's getting blood tested and urine tested. He is off drugs. Or is it just he's manic? Or what's going on? I mean, any views on that?
Well, you know, there's I can tell you that you see it in a lot of people right now, and that you know, the swings of of emotions, and if you look at a lot of the underlying factors, I think are these stressors that we're talking about. You know, that the fact that people who didn't use cell phones, who didn't have a wireless world surrounding them at the level in which we do now. I mean, how much stress is that creating for individual systems that breaks out occasionally in irrational ways? I
was about to say, he lives on his cell phone, and they admit that cell phones, ABC News, increase brain activity and almost create a manic-like state.
Right, and so why expect anything else? And look at the population across the population. We have more people on psychoactive drugs because of some depression or illness. And, you know, I can tell you, where I live in a very dark place, Alaska, in the winter. It's horrible, you know, and it affects me profoundly, I can tell you. And if it wasn't for some level of vitamin D supplements, I would be a total wreck. And most people are vitamin D deficient. That's another article that ran finally recently in the news. We've been saying it for years. Check your D levels. Most people work in cubicle world today. They don't even get in the sun, and when they do, they're so screen blocked they don't get any sun. And vitamin D is leading to more depression. And then you lay on top of that electromagnetic field interference and the chemicals that we ingest, and anything less than manic behavior from time to time would be the exception. And I'll tell you when you really notice it is when the power grid fails in your area, and you notice how quiet it gets. But you also notice your whole body takes an exhale. Your whole body relaxes as you quit compensating for those external fields that are there, like background noise in a crowded room. It's what you were talking about earlier in the program, Alex, getting out of in the country in a remote place where you're away from it. How much better do you feel? Unless you're from New York City.
Well, you know, this proves it, because I'm not consciously thinking about what you're saying at the time, but over my life, whenever there's a citywide blackout, it cuts off. And it's not just the excitement of the power being off. You walk outside, whether it's day or night, and you suddenly just, oh, I feel so good. Yeah. It's like magic. That's the field, isn't it?
It is, and it is. And we because we're in it. There's an old Chinese saying, you know, what's the sound of being born into an explosion? It's called silence, because you don't notice it as sound. And that's what has happened as we've immersed ourselves in this electromagnetic soup. It's been a creeping sound of silence that now, when we truly have silence and that interference is gone, we fully notice it. It's why when we come home from work, one of the first things we do is we kick our shoes off. And the reason is most of us have souls that actually insulate us from the electrical currents within the ground. And there are currents within the ground that our body will, in fact, and does, in fact, rely on. The natural rhythm of this planet is 7.83 hertz. It's called Schumann's resonance.
Well, that's how birds can navigate.
Right, but in Schumann's resonance, that's the ideal state. If your brain is between 7 and 8 hertz, you're in this super creative space that is quite remarkable if you can stay there. And that's the natural rhythm of the planet and where we should be. Instead, we're at 60 cycles in the U.S., or pulses per second, the pulsation of our power grid as our primary sort of interference place. But then we have on top of that now Wi-Fi, wireless of various bandwidths being pulse modulated, creating other secondary effects. This is where that sense of stress that explodes irrationally from time to time, maybe it does explain what happened to Charlie. You know, the fact is, it's happening more frequently with medicate them, dumb them down and numb them down. That is not the right solution. The solution is, how do we learn how to modulate our own brain activity? And there are ways to do this, to learn how to do it, so you're not at the whims of everything that influences you. And quite frankly, what used to take years to perfect, now technology offers opportunities to learn how to find that space and do it consciously with your own effort and basically gain control of your own mind, something that we don't think much about. We have spas for the body, we have gyms for the body, but what do we have for the mind? There are good technologies out there that will stretch the mind, that will cause it to change its capacity by recognizing what it can do by working with it. And that's the difference.
Well, you know, one thing I've noticed, elites, truly rich billionaires are all moving to extremely rural areas. And when you talk to them, they basically wink, wink, and say, we're getting away from all the stuff happening in the city, all the pollution, all the cell phones. And, I mean, they certainly know what's going on.
Yeah, you know, I have a remote place. Mine takes 2 days to walk in overland. You know, there's no trails or roads or anything. And mine's for other reasons. I got a mining property. It's 800 acres with some partners. But, you know, when you go out there, I'm in a valley that's closed off. I do get a cell phone signal, believe it or not, in some places, which totally blows me away because, I mean, I'm in the most remote spot on the planet. But other than that, there is no power grid for at least 30 miles away from me. And, you know, it's a pretty nice feeling when you can go out in those places. And I encourage people to do it, just to shake it off a little bit and get your head cleared and start thinking forward again, and looking for those ways, the simple ways, to gain a little bit more control and shake the stresses off.
Well, Dr. Begich, for me, and then we're going to let you go, and I appreciate the time, the biggest thing people can start with is stop watching television. That's where the most programming is. That's where it's designed. That's where the not just the frequency, but also the messages that the frequency is bound up with. If you'll just turn the TV off, and if you'll just stop it, you know, still go to the movies or whatever if you want, but just stop watching the TV, you'll see a difference in your children, your wife, your husband, everything. Our culture, no one can deny it, is going down the tubes because we're in the death throes of being held by this technological control grid. We've got to wake up to it and say no. Dr. Begich, I want to thank you for joining us. I hope folks will get your videos and books available at Infowars.com. And as soon as you're done setting up your new office, because I know you're redoing your office, I want to get you in here to guest host the show.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to working with you. It's going to be a great experience. I'm getting my backdrop. My office is a mess right now, but it's about reorganized.
Hey, just a bookshelf in the background looks great. Dr. Begich, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. God bless. Take care now.
God bless you. What a great guy. Folks, you know, a lot of scary things we were talking about, but it's more scary not knowing it's there. It's a lot better to know the truth. It's very, very empowering. Visit Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com. When you're on the site, you can also tune in 24 hours a day to my daily radio broadcast. There's also a free iPhone app to listen to the syndicated radio show when and where you want.